Then when my mother and father got divorced, I started living with my stepfather and my mother. I was afraid of him. He was scolding and beating up my mother. He wanted me to have sex with him. It started happening from when I was 8 years old.
He used electric wire, and there is a kind of cane here in Buganda. It's known as Oluga. Whoever knows Oluga knows how much it pains.
You know, everybody loves a baby, right? Everybody says they love children. And how could they subject them to any type of violence, be it bullying at school, physical, sexual, beating, name it?
Children are the future of Africa, yeah. So if we violate them, if we demean them, if we humiliate them, if we hurt them, if we injure them, then we are actually talking about, destroying the future of Africa.
Welcome to the streets. It's not where children should be, but this is where too many end up. This is Uganda's capital, Kampala, and there are many AIDS orphans here, but others have run away to this life because of abuse at home. That was the grim reality for Chandiga Swamed.
In the streets, I was the one I could care about the others who had bad hair, what. I knew someday I would be a hairdresser and a good one. This is my salon. My name's Chandiga Swamed. It's a unisex salon that includes hair cutting, braiding, weaving, and anything as far as hairdressing is concerned.
Against all the odds, Swamed now has his own business and has even bigger ambitions for the future. It's a far cry from life on the streets and the torment of his home life, which he left behind at just 12 years old.
We had some domestic work, just like that. But he substituted all the work. I'm the one who had to do it. And before going to school, so I used to go to school late. They used to cane me at school. And if I had to leave that work undone, I could get some punishment from him. He used electric wire, and there is a kind of cane here in Buganda. It's known as Oluga. Whoever knows Oluga knows how much it pains.
For years, Swamed had to tolerate painful beatings at the hands of his stepfather. It was the day he stood up to his abuser that finally drove him to flee.
There's a method that they used for charcoal stove. They used it to do it in the fire. So he brought it, started doing what? He put it at my shoulder. So it was so painful that it propelled me even to push him, and just like that. But this time I had rebelled against him, so I had to find my own way. I ran away.
Swamed soon realised he may have escaped his father, but in his new life, violence would still be there. He was beaten by the older children and his possessions were stolen. But street children are often seen as a nuisance, and he also had to contend with the beatings at the hands of the authorities.
They came at night, they beat us very severely. Whoever they suspect that is a street child. Even at one incident, they broke the arm of one of our during the beatings.
That was then, and this is now. Times have changed for Swamed, but he still remembers what it was like to scratch an existence on the streets.
We are on William Street. Down here, now near that pole, there was something, a huge tree, and under it there was something like a cave. That's where I used to stay. In that cave, because it was special, we stayed there, about 9 of us.
He lived here for 3 years, using extreme measures to survive. He'd found a septic tank full of human excrement, and he'd reach in trying to haul out coins.
I went there, I found a lot of money, but it was in these stools, in human stool, because that thing is for toilet. So I don't know how that money came in contact with that water, but it was difficult to collect it, all of it at once. I could go with a polythene bag. I could pick just like this, the one which is enough for me for a day. And then I used to go down there and clean it and then put it in my pocket.
When Swamed was retrained as a hairdresser, his life completely changed. Now he is training Kampala's street children to help them find a better life.
I had no resources, so I had to plan little by little. I saved some money and they gave me something like 200,000 top on my capital. So I established my own salon. I told them my ideas. I see I'm in best position to train those children. It gives me a lot of encouragement. That's why I usually encourage my fellow youth.
Swamed has found a way off the streets, but the number of street kids is growing. Even the police have changed their tactics and now trying to find out why the children can't or won't go home.
Why do you get involved? Why do you again make this assumption?
We always try to establish the causes why children are on streets. Some of the reasons that these children run away from homes because of violence against them.
Superintendent Karamura Patrick is a senior policeman, and his travels around this area of the city are a clear sign of how much has changed. His department is determined to work with local NGOs to rescue street kids who are exposed to violence wherever they encounter them. According to Patrick, the most important task is to build rapport with the kids.
It's the endeavor that we must put a program where the street kids are, getting involved. I think you saw there behind, some of them were trying to come up and talk to the police. And then we tell them, we say, don't fear police. When we are mobilizing and calling you, just come. And then we talk to you, we identify all about you, and we help you.
It may be that the police force of the wider society when it comes to the street kids. Their rights are not widely understood.
In many times the community looks at them as a menace, as though they are disturbing them, they don't need them. Sometimes they beat them up and roughen them up and injure them. Then we talk to them about the fact that the children as well, they also have the rights.
Swamed's encounter with abuse is just one story, but it's a problem repeated across the continent of Africa. Coming up in part 2, the new courts in Ethiopia that allow children to confront their abusers, and another childhood stolen. Joseph the boy soldier comes to terms with his violent past in Sierra Leone. In Ethiopia, children's rights have reached the next level of law enforcement. Reliable statistics about rape and sexual abuse are patchy, but snapshot surveys suggest that both are common and that half the crimes are never reported. Now, courts have been established specifically to help child victims. They enable children to testify against those they are accusing without coming face to face. Betty, a specially trained intermediary, helps child witnesses to testify.
This is a room that I will be bringing the child victims. And as you can see, the room is very friendly for children, especially for children. And as you can see, there is a microphone, an earphone, and also a camera.
The camera will bring out the picture, and everything done is seen through the television. So this is how, and we have also a television screen for the judge, and this one is for the public, and this is how we conduct the business.
I feel emotionally, down when I heard this story, emotionally disturbed. But when you see the outcome of them speaking here, and what will that do to the accused, I feel very satisfied.
Research by UNICEF and others shows that while strangers can represent a risk, so too can teachers, and even within their own homes, girls are too often not safe.
Our studies show that both at home and at school, girls are victims of violence much more than boys.
Until I was 3 years old, I lived with my father and mother. Then when my mother and father got divorced, I started living with my stepfather and my mother. I was afraid of him. He was scolding and beating up my mother. I am still afraid of him. I did everything he asked me to do. He was threatening me with a knife. He wanted me to have sex with him. It started happening from when I was 8 years old.
Sarah suffered in silence for 9 years.
It's much more quiet, it's much more silent. It doesn't come out because the child is always expecting that this person I trust, though they abused me today, probably tomorrow they will change and they will not abuse me. So then it continues. It becomes a sequence, it becomes a process.
It happened every week. I wanted to talk to somebody, but if I did, he would also harm my mother. And I didn't want her to get divorced because of me. The last violent act was when I was almost 18. My younger sister was sleeping with me. She saw him when he was trying to have sex with me, and I told her. In the end, my mother found out as my younger sister told her.
After 9 years of repeated rape by her stepfather, Sarah and her mother were brave enough to bring their case of abuse to court. They were supported by the Children's Legal Protection Centre of the African Child Policy Forum, which provides legal and psychosocial services to children.
At the beginning, we went to the Child Protection Unit. At the police, they were very supportive. It was the court that let him go easily. He was bailed out for 3,000 bail. Since he knows that he will be found guilty, we are afraid that he might do something to us. He might harm us.
After posting his bail of less than $300, Sarah's stepfather disappeared. He's yet to be brought to justice. Africa's recent history of conflict and wars has taken its toll on the lives of children. On other continents, they might have been civilian bystanders, In Africa, children are often on the front line. Sierra Leone's civil war robbed Joseph of his childhood. He witnessed the brutal slaying of his mother and sister. He became one of 10,000 child soldiers for whom violence became a way of life.
The time when the rebels come, we don't catch you go.
They never let us go anywhere until they gave us drugs. Marijuana, cocaine. They injected us with it. They forced us to take it whether you like it or not. So you lose your conscience and do whatever they want you to do. In our eyes, human beings were no more than chickens. You decide to do bad, but you don't know what it's bad. You feel you're doing a good job. They gave us weapons to shoot at people and to loot. I just took it as a hobby. The younger children are even worse than the older ones. We took part in everything bad.
Forced to attack and murder members of their own community, there is no hope of returning home. The African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of Children is supposed to protect them in line with United Nations guidelines. It has specific measures to address child soldiers and practices like female genital mutilation. But nearly a decade has passed since it came into force, and progress has been slow.
Of course, we have like female genital mutilation. We have early child marriages. We have child soldiers. We cannot say that is Africa. We cannot say that is the Africa situation. We cannot say those are African cultures that are being used to perpetuate, abuse on the children. Yes. So I totally don't agree with anybody who sits back and say this is African and so it should be done. All children have the right under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, Article 19, that talks about child protection.
Any culture that does harm to society is not worth the paper it's written on. Using culture and tradition as an excuse, you should not commit any type of crime or harmful practices against another human being. And children are human beings.
While the courts in Ethiopia provide redress, elsewhere children across Africa are being rescued through the use of vocational skills organisations, taken from abusive and violent situations and given hope for the future in places like this rehabilitation centre just outside the Ugandan capital, Kampala. Here they are provided with some of the education they missed out on and given the opportunity to live life as a child. After facing the horror of seeing his family murdered in front of him and taking part in unthinkable atrocities, a former child soldier like Joseph can be rehabilitated.
There was a project by Plan called Quest for Peace. They used to play a film about animals that were in danger, so one day I decided to watch the film.
The film that Joseph saw is called Echoes of War and depicts real life stories of children caught up in conflicts. It gives them the chance to understand and deal with the violence in their memories. It's also designed to help them confront their past, to get to the point where they can attempt the seemingly impossible task of asking for forgiveness.
Having killed a lot of people, raped and looted, through that film I've been able to come to my senses and ask for forgiveness from my father. I've even been engaging my fellows, my colleagues, to do the same, so that they can live in harmony with their family.
Joseph has found a way back, and Swamad is now helping to rescue the next generation of street kids.
Sort of situka, those are the skulls. The skull what? That's whereby Joba, Olive, Nerozani. It gives me a lot of encouragement. That's why I usually encourage my fellow youth.
Swamad has moved on, but there are still many more like him. And there are many more Josephs and many more Sarahs. In the context of all this, how does the future look for Africa's children?
I think there is a wind of change. There is growing awareness in Africa about the need to promote and protect the rights and the well-being, the welfare of children.
change is taking place, but it's taking place slowly. I think Africa needs to speed up.
Culture is dynamic. People do change. People do change if they are convinced.
But we still have a long way to go. We still have a long way to go. We cannot afford to be complacent. Frankly, we have to work for an Africa which has zero tolerance for any kind of violence against children.